Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you very much for being here. My name is Scott Evans. I'm the Interim CEO of Edelman Canada, and we're delighted to co-present the launch of the 2026 Edelman Trust Barometer for Canada in partnership with the Rotman School of Management. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, the meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I also want to acknowledge the developments of the Middle East, which we've all been watching over the past few days. These events are unsettling and remind us how rapidly the geopolitical landscape can change in the world today. Edelman first started studying trust after the Battle of Seattle in 1999, and the barometer has been really a vital tool in helping make sense of the changing world. This year marks our 26th year of studying the global state of trust and is actually our 30th anniversary as a leading communications firm here in Canada. We believe that trust is the ultimate currency in the relationship that any institution has with its stakeholders, and it's foundational to a well-functioning society. In this year's report, we've uncovered a new challenge for trust: insularity. This is happening amidst profound political, social, and economic change globally and here at home. If you pause for a moment and cast your mind back to 2025 when we had this survey in field, it was a hugely consequential year for Canada. Tensions dramatically escalated between the United States and Canada with a fierce sense of patriotism through high-stakes moments. I'm talking, of course, about the Blue Jays' incredible World Series fall run this year. But in all seriousness, Canada-US trade disputes, tariffs, and related threats took countless twists and turns, raising deep concerns about economic stability, sovereignty, and government competence. The 2025 federal election last April and leadership transition reshaped trust in government, economic stewardship, and Canada's global positioning. And high-profile strikes and labor actions across Canada, affecting Air Canada, Canada Post, Alberta's education system, Montreal's transit network, all heightened public anxiety about institutional reliability, straining trust among consumers, employees, and government stakeholders. Now, there's no question that as a country, we're under enormous pressure. We all hear the rally cry to build Canada strong, to move quickly on major infrastructure projects, diversify our trade, strike new deals, move faster on efforts that will foster an environment for innovation and commercialization right here in Canada. Trust is one of the foundational elements that will enable us to accomplish these things and power our economy. Trust drives growth. That's why I'm proud to share our latest trust data, the implications for our institutions, and then spark a conversation with a panel that will happen afterwards on how we can use things like trust brokering to break through insularity and benefit Canada. Okay. So for those who don't know much about the Edelman Trust Barometer, it is the largest longitudinal study of trust of its kind. In terms of our methodology, it was fielded last year between October 25th and November 16th, 2025. It was fielded across 28 different markets, 33,000 respondents across 6 continents. Data is collected from a sample of representatives that are demographically representative of the countries that we studied. And in Canada, this was 1,200 respondents, which had the opportunity to take the survey in both English and French. So we're going to start with the big picture. This is what we call the trust index. This is the average trust in the 4 institutions that we look at, that being NGOs, government, media, and business. Now, despite a turbulent year, trust in Canada's core institutions does remain stable at 52% in the neutral category in gray. Developed countries are flat across the board, and developing countries had a slight 3-point increase year over year. Now, Canada is faring better than many of our Western peers. You can see a 5-point difference higher than the US and 8 points ahead of the UK. However, the long-term trust trend in Canada has been one of gradual erosion. The decline of trust in our institutions, the fact that none of our core institutions is trusted, is troubling. More than ever, leaders must lean in and restore confidence in our institutions. Now, the trust divide between high and low income Canadians has persisted since 2012, reaching an all-time high during the pandemic in 2019. While we now have a smaller trust gap when compared to the global average, that being 12 points versus 15 points, and certainly a stark contrast when you look at the gap in the United States of 29 points. The caveat is that high-income Canadians have noticeably lower trust than high-income citizens in other countries, that being 58% versus 63% globally. This could be because many in Canada's top quartile of income, and that would be those earning $80,000 or more a year, are still experiencing significant financial pressures, especially with the cost of living outpacing wage growth. Now that we've set the scene, we're going to go a little bit deeper. Our trending data shows there's a rise in fears, a pullback in optimism, and a consolidation in who and what Canadians trust. Strikingly, you can see from this slide that only 16% of Canadians, or fewer than 1 in 5, believe that the state of things in our country will be better off for the next generation compared to today. Now, what's contributing to this? In Canada and globally, trade and recession-related job fears have reached an all-time high. 63% of Canadian employees say they worry about international trade and tariff conflicts hurting the company that they work for. And 55% are concerned they may lose their job due to a looming recession. Add to that the economic uncertainty, things like rising food inflation, high housing costs, and the worsening climate crisis, and it's no surprise that Canadians are feeling less confident about their future. And we're not alone. This result is consistent with a significant decline in the global average. Consider the optimism decreased by 9 points year over year in the US, putting them at 21%. And you can see these declines represented through the black circles at the bottom of the chart. If these anxieties continue to rise, they could further erode confidence in business and government, reinforcing a sense of economic fragility. The takeaway, optimism must be earned through jobs, through upskilling, and through growth. And with this, we found an abrupt turn inward over the past year. Just 28% of Canadian respondents say they get their information from sources with different political leanings than their own, at least weekly. That's a significant 10-point decrease over the previous year. Sources can mean people, it can mean media, or organizations. Perhaps surprisingly, this puts Canada among the countries least likely to seek out information from sources with different political leanings than their own, only ahead of France and Japan and well behind the US at 35%. These shifts inward have created a new norm of insularity, which can put the brakes on progress at a time when we need to move with speed. We are observing this retreat into insularity, and I'm going to explain this in a moment, can be really understood as a result of several factors. So over the last few years, unmitigated fears, which you can see on the outside circle, have driven a changing attitude towards our institutions and given rise to polarization or a belief that your country is divided and those divisions are entrenched. As polarization deepens, trusted institutions are increasingly viewed with skepticism and suspicion. Maybe government is not doing what's right. Maybe you don't feel that you can believe what you're reading in the news. For business, maybe you stop feeling that they're looking out for you and rather just looking out for the top brass. When you no longer see that these institutions are working for you, you don't feel the need to respect them. This has led to grievance, a state of angry resentment at a system that's rigged against you, including in last year's data, people feeling that violence was a justifiable form of activism. This year, people have become exhausted. They're worn down by constant conflict and outrage, and rather than pushing back, they're pulling away. So today, we are retreating into insularity, or widespread hesitancy or reluctance to trust anyone who feels different from you or unfamiliar. So this story of insularity is the story of 2026. In Canada, 73% have an insular mindset, mirroring a global phenomenon, which we're seeing at average at 70%. And we see this regardless of gender, age, income, or political leaning. Insularity prevails. To measure insularity, we asked respondents whether they could trust people who are different from them in 4 key ways. They live by different core values, believe different facts, and trust different sources. They address societal problems differently, and they have a different culture, background, or lifestyle. Now, insularity creates closed circles. Among those with an insular mindset, 66% trust their neighbors, far above journalists at 56%, and their CEO at 50%, who are in the neutral category. And government leaders and CEOs in general are both distrusted at 44% and 37% respectively. It's worth noting that journalists receive neutral trust in Canada, even among those with an insular mindset at 56%, actually making them the second most trusted. But globally, they are the second most distrusted at 48%. And this is something we're going to explore, a little bit more as we get into our panel discussion. In addition, my CEO and my neighbor received the highest trust globally, both at 61%. And yet here you can see my CEO is much less trusted in Canada at 50%. There is a clear gap and opportunity for Canadian CEOs to use leadership as a force for trust, especially with their own employees. Related to this is a key point. Insularity destabilizes leadership. Canadians with an open mindset are more likely to trust an institution, even if it were led by someone different from their values, uses different sources of information, and has different approaches to societal problems or background. By contrast, insular mindsets result in distrust. And why is this important? Because an insular trust mindset can impose a clear penalty on business and growth. Many of our respondents would rather switch departments than report to a manager with different values. They put in less effort for a leader with different beliefs, and they'd stomach higher prices to reduce the number of foreign companies at home. So rising nationalism. The good news is there's global consensus that insularity needs to be addressed. And in Canada, 1 in 3 see insularity as a large or crisis level problem. So what's the solution to build trust when we're living in an age of insularity? When we're talking past each other and only trusting those we feel close to? Trust in this world must be brokered. Usually when we think about addressing divides, we try to eliminate differences. But that's not a fit when we're trying to navigate a world that's populated by insular groups. To meet this moment, we believe there's an approach that we're calling trust brokering. Trust brokering is a set of practices and behaviors that seek to counter insularity by facilitating the rebuilding of trust across differences. It's about listening and accepting that you may not agree, but you have to try to understand where someone is coming from as you seek to address the challenges you face, whether that be from a societal or business perspective. Rather than trying to change people, trust brokering surfaces the common interests of insulated groups and translates their needs, goals, and realities for one another. A trust broker can be a person, it can be an organization, it can be an institution, but it needs to be trusted by each stakeholder group that's facing a common problem. The onus is not on the individual to change, but the trust broker to facilitate the connection. The crucial point to remember is that trust brokering begins with the acknowledgement and the acceptance of these differences. When we looked at the basis of exceptionalism, so cases when people trusted others across differences, the top results were marked by openness. For example, they have an open mind and don't try to change me. They are transparent about differences. Now, each institution has a role to play in trust brokering. NGOs, according to our respondents, can translate between groups and help us understand each other. They can convene young people and establish mediation programs. Government, which has by far the largest obligation to broker trust, should set the tone by engaging in civil discourse and avoiding rhetoric that seeks to blame others. Media should seek to de-escalate tensions by using accurate versus fear-inducing headlines and being sure to represent different viewpoints of an issue. For business, trust can be built between distrusting groups through bringing people together so they can interact with those who are different from them. They can partner with unexpected organizations. Each of these strategies are equally valued across income levels. And then not represented here, but also scoring highly, is investing in public spaces and hosting community events where employees, customers, and local residents can identify and connect on shared interests. The other important consideration for business and frankly all institutions is recognizing the enormous impact they can have as an employer. Employers have an especially powerful position to scale trust brokering across the workforce. People come into work every day. It's a place of long-term relationships. Employees already have shared goals at a project or a company level, and it's a place where employees have agency. They can influence the environment in which they work, or they can choose to leave it. Here you can see that promoting a shared identity is the top result, followed by bringing people together, teams together with different values. Then training employees to have constructive dialogue despite conflict. The workplace enables a forum for respectful, constructive discourse. And CEOs have a major role to play in trust brokering, as you can see by the graph on the left. So Canadian CEOs have a 38-point gap between expectation versus performance. This compares to a 29-point gap for CEOs globally. So here you have 66% of Canadians who expect their CEOs to bridge the divides and facilitate trust, yet very few are doing it well. So there's a strong opportunity for our CEOs to step up and lead this effort. To model trust brokering employees, CEOs can consult with people with different values. They can engage with different groups known to have opposing views. And they also need to work at building a personal connection with their employees and their customers, because as we know from our data, that proximity matters. And social media, in fact, can be a venue for trust brokering. The data tells us that trusted influencers can vouch for distrusted companies to build trust within a group, with both the company and the influencer likely being trusted as a result. So brokering trust in the age of insularity comes down to this. First, it's recognizing that insularity is reshaping the operating environment. It's pervasive. 3/4 of Canadians are hesitant or unwilling to trust someone different from them. Economic anxiety and tension and division are driving Canadians inward. And this is raising the stakes for leaders who depend on collaboration, innovation, and social license. Growth now depends on bridging divides. Unmitigated differences will stall productivity, weaken leadership credibility, and harden resistance to change. In this environment, business cannot remain neutral. It must actively create the conditions of trust. Trust brokering is a leadership capability. Trust is no longer earned by alignment, it's built by facilitation. Leaders must surface shared interests, acknowledge differences openly, and translate across perspectives. And the workplace is Canada's trust engine. employers are uniquely positioned to scale trust across difference by promoting shared identity, fostering constructive dialogue, and modeling openness. Organizations can strengthen cohesion and performance. Now, I hope as leaders and communicators, you feel somewhat equipped and motivated to consider and take actions that can build trust with your stakeholders. I believe that Canada's future prosperity and our ability to realize our ambition starts with creating an environment of trust that ultimately strengthens our institutions in a way that supports collective prosperity. Canada is recognized as one of the most trusted countries in the world, a unique advantage to underscore as we seek to expand trade, attract investment, and strengthen global peace and security. This is likely attributable to many historical factors, including our relative high institutional trust, our commitment to equity, and efforts in the area of international diplomacy. But these attributes could be at threat if Canadians continue to look inward. Business, government, NGOs, media, all of us, we have a role to play. Now, I presented a condensed version of the Canada Trust Report. All of you who registered as attendees will receive an email, which gives you an opportunity. It'll have a link to download the report. You can also go to our website at edelman.com/ca to download a copy. And please reach out if you have any specific questions about the data or trust products, or to request a custom presentation for your organization. In the interest of time, we will not be taking audience questions today, but many of my colleagues are here today and will be available for one-on-one conversations, which are often more valuable given every organization faces distinct challenges. It's with that, though, that I'm excited to welcome Martine St. Victor, General Manager of our Montreal office, and our panelists to please take the stage. Martine will introduce our esteemed panel and help us unpack the data and explore practical solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That was very nice. Sobering, but very nice. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. And to the people watching online, hello as well. Bonjour à ceux qui nous regardent du Québec et à toutes les communautés francophones à travers le Canada. Panelists, it's good to see you. Ivy Parks, you are president in Canada of the multinational medical technology company BD. In 2024, you told the Globe and Mail that when you realized the impact that BD's products, people, and services had on patients, you saw an opportunity to be part of a company that was truly living its purpose of advancing health in Canada. And with your 400 associates, that's what you do, advance the world of health in Canada. Your market expertise is extensive and your leadership is impactful. This is your 26th year at BD. You started as a teenager, I'm told. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Bill McEvily, we are in your house. Thank you. You are the Jim Fisher Professor of Leadership Development and Professor of Strategic Management here at Rotman School of Management. In your research, you explore social networks as an organizational and strategic resource. We can read your insights in leading academic journals, insights on management, on psychology, sociology, and economics. And you've been editor, actually, of some of these prestigious journals. Your research is celebrated, and you were named twice on Thomson Reuters' list of highly cited researchers. Thank you for being here and for having us in your house.
Thank you for coming, and I'm looking forward to the panel.
Good. Are you sure? Yeah. They always say that at the beginning. Sara Rezaee. Sara, you are Executive Vice President and Head of Creator Marketing North America at a little shop called Edelman. In your position, you work with brands to enable them to be active participants in the creator economy, and you ensure their impact is relevant, credible, and measurable. Sustained by your experience and expertise in both earned and digital media, you are an influential voice in creator marketing and brand influence. Thank you for being here and for being my colleague.
Thank you for having me. Love working with you.
Oh, thank you. They always say that in public. Sara Fulford, you are editor-in-chief of Maclean's magazine, which is in its 121st year of existence. That's more than Time magazine, and it's more than Newsweek. Yes, we should. Woo! Before joining Maclean's, you ran Toronto Life magazine for 14 years, and you are the recipient of multiple national magazine awards for both your writing and your editing. You describe yourself as an optimist. And in one of your editorials last year, you wrote, in reference to AI, that one of the smartest ways to build resilience in the face of this disruption is to develop skills that a bot doesn't have. I think that's great advice. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your panelists. I'm going to start with a question for all of you. This year's theme in our Trust Barometer is insularity. What does insularity mean to you? How does it manifest in your work life and maybe also in your lived everyday experience? I'm going to start with you, Sara, at the end.
Sure. So in the world of journalism, we experience this very acutely because people are in their own echo chambers of information. We were talking just a minute ago about how what people consume information-wise is largely determined by what the algorithm serves them. And the algorithm is magnificent. It's a truly amazing technology at figuring out what you like and what you want to hear. So it confirms your biases and your interests and inclinations. And increasingly, we are living within our own information system. Certainly at a legacy publication that exists in the modern world, we are constantly trying to both play in that space, like reach people through content that is irresistible and grabby through that all the Silicon Valley created distribution systems. We are also trying to create our own direct relationship with our reader, which is much more lasting and possibly like a great source of trust. But that world in which we are playing is like, we know people are in their silos and we are constantly trying to reach people in different silos.
Ivy, how about yourself? How does insularity show up in your industry?
Well, so in the medtech industry, which is where I work, there is a real need all the time to collaborate, to work cross sectors, to make change, and not keep the status quo. And I think when we turn to a more insular kind of mindset, we sometimes forget the progress that we've made, and it slows us down from being able to take lessons we've learned in the past. I'll probably end up talking about the pandemic a lot today. So many lessons, but sometimes we forget those lessons we learned and how much we moved ahead because we look back within ourselves rather than thinking about continuing to make progress.
That's one of the takeaways from the barometer is how insularity slows down growth, right?
Yes, the speed of trust.
That's
like
the speed of
Stephen Covey, one of Stephen Covey's books. But it really has that equation, you know, when trust drops, speed drops, and costs also increase. So that causes things in medtech to also go slower.
Exactly. Bill, how about for you? What about in academia? How have you seen insularity manifest itself?
Well, universities are supposed to be places where you can have any conversation, not just can, but you're encouraged to. And that does still happen, but the way it's showing up first and foremost is in the classroom and then where people mix or don't mix. For a host of reasons, our classrooms have become less diverse in the last year or two. And so just the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody with a very different background and experience has diminished. We're also seeing it on the flip side in terms of where our students are going and where they're not going. Particularly some of our graduate students, our PhD students. Traditionally, the largest market for them has been the United States. more and more of them are coming and saying they don't want a job in the US. Most of our academic conferences are in the United States because the US is really well set up to host those kinds of events. More and more of my colleagues and co-authors are saying, I'm not going to the conference this year because I don't want to go to the United States. So there's a structural issue here. Like, we can still have the conversations, but fewer and fewer different kinds of people are showing up to participate in the conversations.
Sara, what about yourself in the creators, economy?
Yeah.
How does it show up?
So in the space of the creator industry, and I just want to define very quickly
Yes, please
when
do.
I say creator, especially because I know the various sectors that are in the room, a creator isn't, just that person holding up a product on Instagram. A creator is a subject matter expert. They're a key opinion leader. They're a third-party credible source who has a very strong knowledge and expertise in a particular area. And because of that, they happen to have grown a following online to be able to share that knowledge. So with that in mind, in the world of creator, what we're really seeing in this insular mindset is, as the industry continues to grow, as a lot of new creators continue to rise, we are more likely to see individuals following creators that share the same values as them, and that's what their entire feed is made up of, than a mass creator that has 2 million followers. I can personally attest to that. Since the pandemic, my circle has become much smaller. The individuals that I follow, the individuals that I choose to surround myself with, are individuals that share the same values. So I am more interested in following a creator that has 5,000 followers, but aligns so deeply with who I am, than someone that has 2 million followers that'll just passively just go through their content.
That's interesting. And while I have you, what does it mean today, the mantra, meeting people where they are, in this context where trust is more local and Canadians are kind of, joining this unfortunate trend of insularity?
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot in the creator industry, as creators can be, and I know we'll get to it, really great trust brokers. Shocking. They are those individuals that have built such a strong, loyal community. And what I'm seeing with that is a lot of brands and organizations, we say, meet your audience where they are. No longer is it enough to broadcast to an audience. And creators don't want to partner with organizations in that capacity. So meeting audiences where they are now is really understanding where your audience is, what is important to them, what are their values, and then being able to respond in a participatory way. So being able to create something that responds to what the audience wants to see in the communities you're actually trying to reach, versus just broadcasting to them.
Ivy, does it sound like a little bit what you experience in your field as well?
Yeah, really, it does. I think meeting people where they are is about reframing even the language that you're using, the proximity that people are to the subject at hand. In a business world, that can come obviously, just changing the way you're talking about something. But I also think it means about thinking more broadly about how you're partnering, how you're branding yourself, how you are being perceived in these moments. And so for us in business, it's always a bit of a recreation of that brand. It's about aligning to the perception that people have, and also the relationships that we have are super important in that recreation as well.
And so to meet these people where they are, what should we be doing differently or better? What are the tools? What are the ways to achieve that? Ivy, go ahead.
I would go back to thinking about the language that we're using. I'll give an example. We were talking about it just in the green room ahead of time. We are a women's health company. We do a lot of work in women's health, and usually our audience is clinicians using our products. Physicians who are looking for different treatment options for patients, those types of things. But if we are truly a women's health company, And we want our employees to feel connected to the work that we're doing in different ways, because they aren't the clinicians necessarily in the offices. We look to different ways that we can drive that connection for our teams. So we've formed some awesome partnerships in the last little while, one with the PWHL. We were just talking about that in the back room, as a way to make sure that we feel that connection to building women's health in communities, to encouraging women in sport, those types of things, which is outside the realm of the precise work that we do on the day-to-day, but so connected to the work that we do every day. It's all part of that women's health ecosystem.
And also community-based,
Yes.
rooted in community. Sara and the other Sara, how do you reach out to the community more? What are you doing differently?
Yeah, for sure. So in the creative marketing space, one of the first advice I give to organizations, if you want to reach your communities, well, your audience, your communities in a meaningful way, bring creators in early. Do not look at creators as an amplification tactic that gets tacked on at the end of your planning cycle. These individuals, regardless of sector, have built an engaged online following that's incredibly loyal to them. So bring them in early, understand what their communities are looking for, understand what they're needing, and be able to create with them. And I think the magic happens, and we see a lot of brands doing it well, is when you're co-creating something that's rooted in community versus broadcasting just at them.
Sara, what does it mean in the media landscape when we say meeting people where they are?
Well, back to the platform question, I think one of the challenges and also creative opportunities of being in media is every week there's a new platform. So we're constantly engaging with readers, whether they want to listen to our work or get it in their inbox in the morning, or it's, we create an article and then we have a TikTok with the author making their case on that platform. So readers' habits change, my habits change, and it's our job to be relevant in that space on that platform.
And while I have you, are there brands or businesses or even business leaders that come to mind that in your view are doing it right to bring people together to broker trust?
In the information space, we were talking earlier about how so much of what people reach has to do with what access they have to the information. So many, I don't know about you, but I am swimming in an information soup with all manner of things that seem possibly right and maybe wrong, maybe a lie. And so what I do is when I see something that some algorithm shows me, I go find some verification source. So usually it's a news media organization that I have paid for. And then sometimes it's an app. Increasingly, it's an app like, oh, I'm seeing this crazy thing on social. I'm now checking the Globe. Is that true? I'm checking the New York Times. Is that true? So those are organizations, I think, increasingly as we live in a world of AI video fabrications and people so quickly amplifying things that aren't true, that there are these sort of walled gardens that people go to get confirmation. The worrying thing about this, the flip side, of course, is those are behind paywalls. So these are sort of siloed, privileged spaces where information costs money. And therefore, it might have sort of the right readers if you're looking to influence leaders in the country, but it has a diminished number of readers because it is behind a paywall. I mean, there are some really good paywall jumpers, but don't quote me on that because that's that underpins the business model of many news organizations. But one space that I think is remarkable in being both a legacy media organization and free is the CBC, which of course is funded by the government. You always have to look at the media, as we just saw with the Washington Post, the calamity that happened there, so much of what matters in a media organization is who owns it. And we own the CBC. And for all its strengths and weaknesses, it is a vast information system that is free and follows the practice of good journalism, habits, customs, standards, and it is not always perfect, but it is a space in this noisy world of information that is unverified that should be, I hope, well stewarded and protected.
Thank you. Bill, who jumps out at you as a brand, a leader, or a business that's able to bridge the divide?
Yeah, I have a couple of examples. Two are Canadian and one is not. So the first is the former CEO of Lululemon, Calvin McDonald. Happens to be an alumnus of this institution, graduated from our executive MBA program, not why I selected him, but it goes back to the pandemic. And we actually had him here online speaking to us about their experience. And they were struggling with that point of the pandemic when everything was closed. We weren't allowed to go out. And for a retail operation, this was really monumental. And they kept going round and round and trying to figure out how to sort that out. And he finally said they realized that they had to start with what was best for their people. And they were going to figure out everything premised on that. So they closed every store in the world and didn't fire a single person. So this is the metaphor of never waste a good emergency. And I think Calvin McDonald epitomized that at that moment. A second example is also from Canada, which is Shopify's CEO, Toby Lutke. And there's been tons written and said about trust and what it is and what it means for organizations. And he crystallized this in a very compelling way when he described trust as like a battery. New relationships start off at 50%, and depending on how it goes, it either energizes the battery up or depletes it down. And I really thought that was quite compelling because it made a lot of sense. It was easy to understand. And in that sense, it's great leadership communication to get your point across very simply with a metaphor that really resonates to what it means. But at the same time, he was putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is something that's important to me as the leader of this organization, and you can hold me accountable for this. So I thought that was a great example. And the last one is the company Danone that makes yogurt and other kinds of products, a global company. And this really goes more into how they try and cultivate building trusting relations and building bridges within their organization. They realized that at the C-suite, the highest level, and the senior management level, there were lots of opportunities for those people to meet, interact, and build relationships. The middle management and front manager levels, it was lacking. And they realized that there was a lot of missed opportunity as a result. So they had people and country managers all trying to solve the same problem, some of them coming up with solutions and some of them not, and no opportunities to share that knowledge. And so they came up with this thing that they called the marketplace. I call these social tools that companies devise for their own purposes and needs, which bring people together. And if you saw that, an example of it, you'd think it looked ridiculous because people are dressed in costumes. There's loud music playing. It looks very silly. But what they're doing is they're handing out stories about how they solved the problem. And other people are going through the marketplace and quote unquote buying the solutions. And as a result, they're helping each other out. And so this is something that was really important to those managers, and it was important to the organization.
Danone is the favorite yogurt of Edelman.
Okay, even better.
Sara, you work with a lot of brands. Who's doing it right?
Well, I'm going to say, actually, we have them in the room right now. Microsoft, I think, does a really good job when it comes to connecting with their communities. Obviously, Microsoft, and being one of the leading voices in AI, it's a very complicated topic, but really the amount of investment and effort they have in understanding their communities, trying to see, to learn from their communities, and bringing even creators into the process is remarkable. We happen to support them too, so we love them. But I think that's a brand that's doing it really well. And I think there's a lot of brands that are starting to catch on. And I think, using Microsoft again as an example, or even LinkedIn, when we're talking to the C-suite at these organizations, they want to understand what the communities are saying. They're not interested in just broadcasting at them. And they're saying, hey, let me sit down with some creators and talk to them. And you saw that with Ryan Rodlinsky, CEO of LinkedIn, literally sitting down at Davos this year with creators to understand what it is that they're looking for, especially when you're looking at a platform like LinkedIn, which is really driving the conversation in the future of work, and really investing that time to sit down and learn from the communities. I think that's how you're going to break through. And I think, brands should take note of that.
The common thread here is listening to our people, listening to the community. Ivy, you not only lead BD Canada, but you're also chair-elect of MedTech in Canada, which is the only national trade association in Canada that focuses solely on the medical technology industry. Can you share an example of where BD or MedTech, or both actually, successfully acted as a trust broker?
Yes, so many examples. And probably I would go to both, because I think, I have the privilege of working with MedTech Canada, so our industry association, and there are so many opportunities, and it's such a great way to be able to amplify your voice in a lot of different areas of trust brokerage. I'll probably go back to the pandemic, which I said I would end up doing, but there's just so many great lessons that I want to try and make sure stay alive. And probably one of my most proud moments as an employee in the medtech industry for my entire career was in those earlier days of the pandemic, and I would listen to the radio and I would hear about the number of PCR tests that we would be doing in any given day. And as a manufacturer of those said tests, I thought to myself, we do not have that many tests. I really hope that some of my competitors also have tests so that we can supply the needs of the Canadian market. And it actually drew us together as an industry association. Not that we can share that competitive information back and forth, but we were all the holders of really important information. And we were not being asked so much our opinion or about how we could help provide support in those times. So we took it upon ourselves as a group of members of industry, yes, competitors in many ways, but also as we took it very seriously, our role in helping in a very difficult situation, to come together and go to government together and say, we have this information, and if you ask us, we will provide this information, which we think will help you get a better sense on what we can and can't do. And so it's moments like that, and I think that trust brokerage came from building that community together of companies that wouldn't normally be working together, but building that community together in order to bring about good change and to bring a higher understanding of the situation. So that's maybe an example.
That's a great example. So there's a lot of there are a lot of expectations of leaders, of CEOs. Are we expecting too much? Are we expecting the right things? I want to hear all of you, but since you're smiling,
Okay.
I feel like you have a burning answer.
I think as leaders, people do expect us to be the voice. And I think it comes with leading by example. I think that's really what people are looking for, is an example to be set. Is it okay? Can I do that too? I'm looking to you as being somebody who I'm going to gauge my response of. And I think there's lots of ways that you can be the broker of trust, and that you can take that position in kind. And I think it is so important for us to do that maybe less overtly sometimes, but by building coalitions, by bringing together teams. That example I just gave in the medtech industry, I think you don't have to be super overt about the opinion you have or the topic that you want to raise, but you can do so in a way that brings people together, even from different perspectives, for a common goal. So yeah, I think it's incumbent on us to lead by example in that area.
Bill, are we expecting the right things of CEOs? Are we asking too much?
I'm going to give the answer that academics love to give, which is it depends, or yes and no. So the yes part of this is we absolutely expect too much from our CEOs, not just when it comes to trust. You know, when a company performs well, the CEO gets pictured on the business magazine, and when they do poorly, they get blamed. And it's one person, you know, trying to explain this really complex phenomenon. We think about trust in society and organizations. It has to do with economics. It has to do with geopolitics. It has to do with trends in culture and technology and so on and so forth. So it's one person. And by the way, the role happens to be you're going to answer to this diverse set of constituents, sometimes conflicting, and sort it all out for us and make us feel good in the end. When we've done studies on trust in organizations, and especially the network of trust in organizations, guess what? The CEO is not the most central person in that network. The CEO and the senior executive team is almost always on the periphery. When you're thinking about leaving the company and going to get another job, the person you go to confide in is not the CEO. So to expect the CEO to somehow make sure that trust happens is a little bit too much. They don't have the time anyways. But we do need to expect more from them, I think, in a different way. So the CEO's role is to set the tone. That example that I gave of Toby Lutka is a very good one, I think, of saying, look, this is important to how I think about it, and lead by example. But I think the other thing that's really important to do is that, you know, trust doesn't just happen. I mean, it does in certain ways that we all know in a very personal sense. But when you get into a large organization or system, there's this notion of trying to be a little bit more deliberate and intentional about it. So what I'd like to see is CEOs be more intentional about thinking about how to design for trust, how to think about what our strategic priorities are, where our critical interdependencies are, and have a conversation about why trust can or maybe is not important in that particular place. And then if it is, have another conversation about how are we doing, and if we're not doing well enough, what can we do in terms of changing the organization to help facilitate this? Now, it's a really interesting and unique design problem, because I can't make you be friends with somebody else. I can't make you trust somebody else. But I can create the conditions for trust to take hold. And the best example of this, if you're familiar with the concept of psychological safety from Amy Edmondson, which initially came out of a medical setting, this is where we were sort of making sure that teams that were really working together in a very interdependent way under a lot of pressure felt okay to not succeed or to fail. And the important thing was to have a conversation about that and learn from it so you wouldn't fail again. So those are some of the things that I think we should expect from our CEOs leading that process.
Sara, in your magazine, you've profiled many CEOs. You have proximity to CEOs. From the reporting point of view, are we expecting too much?
Well, I'm literally make my living not trusting anybody. So I don't know about expectation. I am like trained to practice low trust. What I'm trained in is not to take anyone's word for anything, but to verify and inspect the evidence. So I imagine one way that CEOs, I've never counseled a CEO in anything, so don't listen to me, but don't lie, and be your authentic self as much as possible. But really, I'm the last person you should be asking, because my job is to be suspicious.
Suspicious, plus before you had the insider trading, so you're on a roll. That's good. While I have you, 56% of Canadians, Sara, have trust in journalists, even though clearly you do not have trust in people, but that's a We'll have
That's how I
another.
like it.
We'll do another panel on that. So it's 56% of Canadians. The global average is 48%. What do you think the percent? Why do you think the percentage is higher in Canada? Why do we trust you and your colleagues more?
Well, I was delighted to see that statistic. It was really one of the bright spots in the research that was presented today. I'd like to think it's because Canadian journalists are awesome, and that's, we just do our jobs really, really well, and that's why there is trust in our work. I suspect it has to do with larger geopolitical factors, namely that in this country, our political divides are not that wide, certainly not compared to our neighbors to the south. We currently have a prime minister who could be a conservative. He took the conservatives' ideas and was elected, in the best possible act of theft. But my point is that the space between our two major political parties is not that wide. And so we don't have a media ecosystem that is so ideological and so determined to undermine each other and shared sets of facts because we are ideologically kind of close to each other, which is like the exact opposite of what's happening in America. I also suspect, and really this is just a guess, that Canadian news media is already its little micro silo in the American landscape. So once you're interacting with the Canadian news source, like, oh, I found my people, they know where Saskatchewan is. And then we're like in the same horizon of being. So lack of polarization is largely the reason, I think.
Sara, you mentioned before that brands, institutions should partner up with creators sooner rather than later. Can you take us through the steps? I'm an organization and I have something to sell or something to test. What do I do?
Yeah, for sure. Oftentimes I say to brands that are interested in the creator space or, they're just intrigued, where do I start? I think oftentimes they're very quick to say, I want to work with that person. What I always say, for creator marketing to work really well, the magic happens when it is grounded in shared interests, because then you're in it for the long haul with the creators. I always say, don't do a one-off campaign and be invested in the creators. So I would say, before you're asking, who should I partner with? Ask yourself, who am I? What do I stand for as an organization? What are my values? What are the commitments I'm willing to take? What are almost like the parameters and guardrails I'm willing to work within? Once you have a good sense of that, then you start to look at, okay, who are the voices that's going to allow me to reach the communities I'm trying to reach in a very effective way and a meaningful way? I can't emphasize enough the importance of thorough vetting when it comes to creators. Creators, we're talking about CEOs. How do you build trust with CEOs? Creators, I always say, are CEOs of their own brand, but creators are also humans. Humans make mistakes. And so there are times a lot of creators maybe share a certain point of view online, and they're very vocal about it. In fact, creators are encouraged. They have built such a strong following, and part of the responsibility that comes with that is using their platforms to amplify the voice of others. So it's so incredibly important that you're vetting creators to ensure that the topics that they're talking about is something that you can truly stand behind as an organization. We have seen many, many organizations and brands fall into a really bad place and be canceled because they didn't take those precautions. It seemed really great, but when things went bad and a creator maybe was exposed for saying something, they were very quick to turn their back on a creator. So I would say vetting is incredibly important. And then once you have those right partners, I always say again, and I said it at the beginning, don't view them as amplifiers. Look at them as extensions of your voice. You've invested so much time in finding the right voices that reach your community. Treat them as partners and extensions of your brand. Bring them into the process. Learn from them around how they were able to build such a loyal audience, and then co-create something that's meaningful. And then look at that, see what works, and then take those as learnings as you're doing your next creator program. For me, I always say, if you're not leveraging creators and trusted voices to build your brand online, you're not fully building your brand.
Sara, what is the perception of creators in the newsroom? Particularly because many of them have reinvented themselves or positioned themselves as independent news producers.
So I think the honest answer is like a mix of envy and admiration on one side and like contempt and disdain on the other. So the envy and admiration part is the intimacy piece. Like when a creator, a expert, someone who has a direct relationship with their audience is communicating, there can be like a really enviable, relaxed, authentic intimacy. And that is not what the legacy media is used to. And there's something real and attractive happening there. And so legacy media members are imitating that, right? Like we're stealing the best techniques of talking directly to the audience. I think the other day on my phone, I saw just after America launched the attack in Iran, it was Jake Tapper from CNN got the president on the phone for half an hour and then described that conversation from his car wearing a hoodie, like, you know, holding his phone up. And I was like, a CNN guy like that 8 years ago would have rushed to the studio and put on a suit and got the makeup going and the right lighting and looked all important, but he had a hoodie and he was in his car. And that's just, we're learning that from the intimate relationship that creators have with audience. The disdain part or skepticism is the lack of rigor, parameters, practice, code of ethics, standards, and fact checking that, should I go on? That,
How do you really feel though?
that is like talking, you know, we talk about truth. Those are the conditions where reliability, I was going to say authority, but that really makes me sound like I work for a magazine that's been around for 121 years. The kind of underpinning of reliability and facts that I think are so important when communicating information. So I guess what the legacy media world is trying to do is harness that intimacy while practicing all that good stuff you learn in journalism school about fairness and balance and accuracy and responsibility.
Thank you. Bill, you are a scholar of trust. You're a scholar of many things, but you're also a scholar of trust. You've said that trust is a fundamental ingredient for companies, especially in times of uncertainty. Based on what you've seen in your research, based on what you've seen in the barometer, notably that employers are well positioned to be trust brokers, how can businesses, organizations be intentional and designed for trust in their employees?
How much time do you have? I'm just kidding.
Give us the shorter version.
The high level place to begin is to be very clear about what both your strategic priorities are and the priorities of your people, which aren't always exactly the same. And thinking about why that's the case. And that sometimes in and of itself for some companies is a challenge because they don't know both of those things. But finding areas where there are opportunities that both serve the strategic purpose and the employee's purpose is a home run for everybody. And then the second thing is that unfortunately there's no one size fits all when it comes to building trust in an organization. You know, what works for Toby Lutka or Lululemon or Shopify is not going to work someplace else. And that's frustrating because it takes a lot of time and effort and it's work. But if you think about it as a strategic asset that you're investing in, then it's worth it. It's also worth it because whatever solution you come up with is going to be very different from what your competitor might need. And so if somebody's going to try and copy you and erode your advantage, it's not going to work that well. But focusing on the employee resonates with this other conversation we had earlier about meeting people where they live. And again, that's part of the responsibility of the CEO. It's easy to hear about and think about these practices that are floating around that other companies are pursuing, but until you actually talk to your people and find out what it is that is a priority for them, whether it's in their current role or in their career, is something different. And that's the place to begin and work from there and think about it with a very much of an organizational design and alignment mentality.
I mean, you're right. One size doesn't fit all, but there must be common practices or practices that we see at numerous companies that work.
Yeah, so there are common practices. I think the sweet spot is finding situations where, again, there's some interdependency across different parts of the organization, but there's also some ambiguity or uncertainty. It's not written into somebody's job description that they do this thing, that when I come knock on your door, you take 15 or 20 minutes out of your day to help me out. So ultimately, it's making those opportunities available to people and those connections available to people. And whether it's through what Danone called a marketplace or something we do here with students called a reciprocity ring or whatever it is.
What is that? Talk to us about that.
So the reciprocity ring is something that is something that we introduce to all of our MBA students. And it teaches them the value of helping out other people and how important that is, without expecting anything back in return. And that's a little perplexing at first. But we have students try it and they can see how valuable that is as an asset, meaning that network of relationships. When you get 20 people together, we do this in groups of 20, it's amazing how resourceful they are. And so they quickly realize, oh, networks are really valuable and useful to me and my career and what my goals are. I want that. But the catch is that if you want to enjoy that, you have to participate first. You have to contribute to the network first and build a solid reputation for yourself. So those are kinds of practices that are around in tools. It doesn't matter what the name is, but the ingredients will be similar across companies, looking for interdependencies where there's some ambiguity and there's an upside potential where, people can share knowledge and learn from each other, and that's going to make them more productive or the company more innovative or what have you.
Ivy, I saw you nodding.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, all of those things. I think finding ways for employees to come together and embrace the differences, but also find the commonalities between them is super important. We spend a lot of time allowing or encouraging employees to find common interests and then to start up smaller groups of folks with similar interests. And that gets them networking with folks that they aren't necessarily working with on the day-to-day, but they get to learn a little bit more about those people through their common interests. And that starts to build trust at the ground level. I think as well, as a leader, being relatable in some of those cases, showing up for some of those groups myself, for being there in some of those moments, I think that also helps to build trust and that we are walking the talk, I guess I would say, really living the purpose that we are communicating all the time with our teams.
And to all of you, you're familiar with the barometer. You had it before. If you could recommend one key action for your industry peers, so in your respective industries, on one key action based on the barometer, what would it be based on the results? Sara Fulford.
Sure. I mean, this might apply to all industries, maybe even CEOs, but be like as authentic as possible. So I find in journalism, and this is something we can borrow from new media, is the human-to-human connection is a really powerful thing. And one reason I love magazine journalism is because it does away with the idea of an objective, important newspaper voice and invites the writer to appear fully realized as a human being on the page using first-person singular and communicating their lived experience in addition to their reporting from a situated, subjective place. And I guess that combination of like authority research reporting coupled with, and I'm just a person who's on this journey with my own baggage and lived experience is a very powerful thing.
Ivy, for you, one key action?
I think the key action for me would be to keep coming together so that we can amplify our voice. So specifically within the industry that I work, we have slipped backwards a little bit from where the place that we came out of a situation like the pandemic in. Things have slowed down. There is less trust between the different sectors, and that slows our ability to really make progress. And so I guess the one action would be to keep collaborating and coming together and finding ways that we build that momentum again as an industry.
Professor?
I would say if you organize it and build it, they will come. Especially to have conversations about their ideas, the things that they're creating that they believe are valuable. And people like it when you organize things for them. Just don't call it networking. People hate networking. But more and more, I think we have to think about how to organize and build it, and so that people who maybe are a little bit more distant now have the opportunity still to participate. And we do have opportunities with technology to do that to some extent.
Sara, Rezaee, one key
Yeah,
action.
for sure. So when it comes to creators, especially, a key action I would say is when you decide to leverage creators as trust brokers for your organization, regardless of sector, and when you make that decision and you learn about the community, now you're in it with them, let them create. They know their audience the best. They know what's going to resonate. If you're trying to reach, whether it's an existing community or a new community, let them do what they do best. The more prescriptive you are, the less authentic it will be. So allow them to go and trust the process, that they know what they're doing.
Sara, Rezaee, Professor McEvily, Ivy Parks, and Sara Fulford, and to the Edelman team and Rotman School for organizing this. I say thank you to everyone. I see there's food. Enjoy the cocktail, and we see you next year.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about it. Follow up with you.